My name is Dana Reyes. I am 31 years old. And the thing I remember most clearly about that Thursday evening is not what my father said. It is the way he said it, leaning back in his dining room chair, coffee cup in hand, entirely unbothered, as if he were commenting on the temperature outside and not on 31 months of unauthorized charges to my name. His voice had the same measured flatness it always had when he was explaining something he had already decided was not a problem. I have known that voice my entire life. I grew up inside it, and for a long time, I mistook its evenness for reasonableness. I need to back up considerably, because to understand what happened in that dining room on the 14th of February, a Thursday at approximately 7:22 in the evening, you need to understand several things about my family and about me, things that did not become clear to me all at once, but accumulated quietly over years the way water accumulates in a low place, until one February night when I opened a banking app, and everything I had been carefully not seeing came into focus at once. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, the middle child of three. My father, Gerald Reyes, worked for 22 years as a floor supervisor at a regional distribution warehouse on the eastern edge of the city. He wore the same kind of work shirt every morning, gray collared, his name stitched above the chest pocket, and he came home every evening smelling of the warehouse, of concrete and cardboard, and the particular metallic cold of a facility where the loading dock doors open and close all day. My mother, Patrice, worked part-time in the billing office of a dental practice until I was about 14, and then intermittently after that, picking up hours when the household needed them and stepping back when things were stable enough to manage without them. We were not poor. We were also not comfortable in any consistent way. Money in my childhood home was something that arrived and departed in uneven intervals, and the anxiety around its departure was a low-frequency hum that ran beneath everything, beneath dinners, beneath holidays, beneath the particular way my parents looked at each other when a bill arrived that they had not fully planned for. I am the middle child, which in my family meant something specific. My older sister Vanessa was my father's unambiguous favorite, sharp, funny, the one he bragged about to his coworkers, the one whose college acceptance letter to the University of Washington he kept in his wallet for a full year after she was admitted. She left for Seattle when I was 15 and settled there permanently after graduation. She calls on birthdays. She visits at Christmas when flights are not too expensive. My younger brother Marcus is my mother's. He is 5 years younger than me, and he has always been the one who needed things. Not out of laziness, I want to be fair to him, but out of a particular temperament that made independence feel dangerous to him in ways it never quite felt to me. Marcus has lived within 15 minutes of my parents his entire adult life. He has worked a series of jobs that lasted between 8 months and 2 years. He has needed help with rent, with car payments, with registration fees, with security deposits on apartments he later had to leave for reasons that were, and were not his fault. My parents have provided that help when they could and apologized sincerely when they could not, and the entire arrangement has operated as a settled, unremarkable fact for as long as I can remember. And then there is me. I want to be clear that I am not resentful of Vanessa and not resentful of Marcus. What I am is clear-eyed, and what I have come to understand clearly in the months since February 14th, with the particular sharpness of a thing that was always true but only recently visible, is that in my family's private economy, I occupied a specific role that had nothing to do with favoritism in either direction. I was the reliable one, the one who did not require management, the one who showed up on time, handled things quietly, never made scenes, never called at inconvenient hours with problems that needed solving. I was, in the specific language my family used without ever quite saying it aloud, the low-maintenance one. And for most of my 20s, I accepted that as a kind of compliment. I was proud of it even. It felt like competence. It felt like the particular dignity of a person who can be trusted to take care of herself. It took me until I was 31 years old to understand what it actually was. By the time I was 23, I had moved out of my parents' house and into a one-bedroom apartment in a building on Wendover Avenue, 12 minutes from where I grew up. I had taken a job as a billing coordinator at a regional logistics company called Hartfield Freight Partners, starting at $38,400 per year and moving to $43,200 after my second annual performance review in the fall of 2016. The work suited me. I am organized by instinct. I understand how money moves through a system, where it accumulates, where it leaks, what the paperwork looks like when something has gone quietly wrong for longer than it should have. I am good at reading statements. I am good at catching errors. That last quality turned out to matter a great deal, though not in the way I would have predicted. I had one credit card, a Visa issued through my bank with a limit of $8,500 that I used conservatively and paid in full every month without exception. My credit score at 23 was 741. By 26, it was 758. I checked it quarterly. I tracked my utilization ratio. I was, in short, exactly the kind of careful financial manager that my parents had always been quietly in awe of and had never quite found the discipline to become themselves. My relationship with my parents during those years was warm in a functional, low-friction way. I had dinner with them on Sunday evenings most weeks. My mother cooked, my father watched football before and after. Marcus stopped by with varying reliability. I helped when things came up. When my mother needed a minor procedure in the spring of 2021 and the copay was $340 they did not have spare at that particular moment, I covered it without being asked twice. When the water heater failed in November of that same year and the replacement cost more than they had on hand, I contributed $600 toward it and did not bring it up again. When Marcus needed his car registration renewed in early 2022 and was $214 short, I sent it through a payment app on a Tuesday afternoon and thought nothing of it for the remainder of the day. I did not keep a formal ledger of these contributions. That matters. I want you to understand that I was not tracking them because I was not thinking of them as debts. I was thinking of them as the ordinary texture of being a person embedded in a functional family. Help flows in the direction it is needed, and someday, in the way of such things, it circles back. I had no reason to think of this arrangement as anything other than what it appeared to be. I had no reason, in particular, to imagine that my family had found a more efficient method of accessing my resources without the inconvenience of asking. If I am honest with myself, I think I also found something in it, in being the one who could help, in being competent and solvent where my family was sometimes neither. It was the only version of being needed that had been consistently available to me. Vanessa was needed for her brightness. Marcus was needed for his fragility. I was needed for my stability, for what I could provide when things went sideways, and I had arranged my life with considerable care to make sure I was always in a position to provide it. I kept my expenses low. I maintained my emergency fund at 4 months of take-home pay. I did not have a car payment. I cooked most of my meals at home. These were things I told myself I did because they were simply the responsible choices, the obvious choices for someone who valued security. And they were that. They were also, I understand now, the choices of a person who had accepted, on some level that she had not consciously examined, that her job in the family was to be available, to be the floor when other people needed something to stand on. What I did not know, what I would not know for 31 months, was that at some point in the first quarter of 2022, my parents had obtained the full number for my Visa card and had begun using it. I have a theory about how this happened. In October of 2021, I was at my parents' house helping my father set up a streaming subscription he had been wanting for months. I used their shared desktop computer, an old Dell that sat in the corner of the living room with a broken speaker and a desktop cluttered with overlapping shortcut icons, to log into a travel booking website where I had stored my card on file because I needed to check a flight confirmation for a work trip the following month. I remember the moment specifically because the keyboard stuck on the letter M and I had to press it twice every time. My father is technically literate enough to navigate a browser's autofill settings. He knows what saved payment information looks like and where it is stored. I cannot prove what he did or did not do in the hours and days after I used that computer. What I can prove, documented across 31 months of transaction history, is everything that came after. Before I tell you what happened the night that fraud alert arrived, I want to ask you something first. Where are you right now as you watch this? Are you somewhere warm, or is it cold where you are tonight? I think about the weather when I think about that February. It had been gray in Greensboro for nearly 2 weeks straight, not raining, just overcast and flat, the kind of sky that makes the afternoon feel like early evening from noon onward. I drove to work every morning in that gray and drove home in it, and I think it was doing something to my alertness without my realizing it, softening the edges of things, flattening details that should have felt sharper. I wonder sometimes whether I would have opened that account sooner if the weather had been different. I wonder if weather is ever really the reason for anything or only ever an explanation we reach for afterward. The fraud alert arrived on February 14th at 6:53 p.m., a text message from my bank flagging an unusual charge of $312.47 at a home improvement retailer in Greensboro. I was on my couch eating leftover soup and watching a documentary about historical navigation techniques. I read the alert twice, assumed a processing error, and opened the banking app out of professional habit more than any real alarm. I am a billing coordinator. Unusual charges are things I look into. That is simply what I do. I had not logged into that particular account in several months. I used a different card for my daily spending, a rewards card I had opened 2 years earlier, and I checked the Visa primarily to confirm the balance was zero after each monthly automatic payoff. I had no reason to believe anything was happening on it. The last charge I personally remembered making was in June of the prior year, $74.13 at an electronics retailer for a charging cable and a desk lamp I had debated buying for 3 weeks. I remembered the transaction because I had been faintly annoyed by the price of the lamp. Everything after June of the prior year was unrecognizable. I scrolled up through the transaction history the way you reread a sentence when the words have not settled into meaning. Groceries from a store on Battleground Avenue, 2 blocks from my parents' house, $143.28 on a Saturday in July, $97.64 on a Tuesday in August, $188.41 the month after that. A gas station charge in my parents' zip code, $61.17, a weekday in September. A pharmacy charge I did not recognize at a location in Northwest Greensboro, $43.90. A weekend hotel stay in Savannah, Georgia, 2 nights, $487.33, booked in August of 2023. A garden center charge in the spring of that year, $128.44. My brother Marcus's car registration fee, $214, paid in March of 2023. Not via the payment app one had used myself the year before, but charged directly through my Visa from a device that was not mine, to my account without my knowledge. An HVAC service call, $339.67, billed to an address I recognized as my parents' house on Millbrook Road, processed in November of 2023. 11 categories in total, spanning 31 months. I sat on my couch and did not move for a long time. I want to tell you that I cried. I did not. I have thought about this since, about why the tears did not come in those first minutes, and what I have concluded is that what I was feeling was not grief yet, and not rage yet. It was something closer to a structural recalibration. The specific physical sensation of a person who has just discovered that something she believed was solid was hollow. I had been funding my parents' grocery runs for nearly 3 years. I had been funding their weekend in Savannah. I had been paying for the HVAC repair at the house where I grew up, the house I still visited every Sunday evening for pot roast and football, apparently at my own expense. I had been doing all of this while believing, month after month, that I was simply a careful, responsible person managing her own finances. I had been carrying a second household inside my credit account, and I had not known it, which meant I had not agreed to it, which meant that for 31 months, the people who raised me had been making a private calculation about what I owed them, about what I would not notice, about what kind of person I was. And for 31 months, their calculation had been correct. By 7:14 p.m., I had tallied $18,340 across 11 spending categories. I am a billing coordinator. I know how to read a statement. I built the summary in a notes app on my phone in approximately 20 minutes, working backward from the most recent charge to the first unrecognized transaction in March of 2022. At 7:19 p.m., I drove to my parents' house. I did not call ahead. I've been asked about this choice many times since, and my answer has never fully satisfied the people asking, but here it is. I did not call ahead because I had spent 31 years being the daughter who does not show up unannounced. The daughter who calls first, who sends a message to confirm, who arrives prepared and on time and causes no disruption. I had been that person so completely and so consistently that my parents had built their financial behavior around the certainty of it. They had counted on me being the kind of person who does not arrive without warning. I needed, just once, to be the thing they had not accounted for. I needed to see their faces before they had time to arrange them. My parents were in the dining room when I arrived. My mother was clearing the dinner plates, a pot roast she made every Thursday, the smell of it still warm in the air of the house. My father was at the table with a cup of coffee and his phone, the way he always was in the hour after eating. The television was on in the adjoining room, a cooking competition, the volume low, light and noise filtering through the open doorway. The kitchen light was on above the sink. The whole scene had the quality of an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind that had been ordinary in that house every week for 30 years. I set my phone on the table between them, the banking app open to the full transaction history, the 11-category summary at the top. I said nothing. I let them look. My mother set down the dish she was holding. My father leaned forward and tilted his head toward the screen, the way he always did when he was reading something he needed to see clearly. I watched his face with the focused attention of a person who has decided that the information she is about to receive matters more than anything she could say. I watched him for surprise. I did not find it. That's not, my mother started. It's the visa, I said. The one I haven't used since June. A silence followed. I did not try to fill it. 11 seconds. I counted. Then my father leaned back in his chair, and he looked at me the way he had always looked at me. Not unkindly, but from a settled distance, the way you look at something you have already assessed and filed away and mostly stopped really seeing, and he said, "We didn't think you'd notice. You never checked that account." I have returned to that sentence many hundreds of times in the months since February. I have turned it over in every light I can find. What strikes me still is not the content of it, though it is a full confession, unambiguous, delivered in a single sentence, but the register of it. He was not ashamed. He was not apologetic. He was not startled. He was mildly inconvenienced, the way a person is when a plan they have been relying on is disrupted by a variable they did not expect. He was explaining a strategy that had functioned for 31 months and had now, because of an automated bank alert, stopped functioning. He was not seeking forgiveness. He was offering context, as though context were a synonym for justification, as though explaining a thing were the same as making it acceptable. My mother still had not fully looked up from her phone when she said, "We've been going through a difficult stretch. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent thing." "The hotel in Savannah," I said. She was quiet. "Marcus's registration." My father turned his coffee cup slowly on the table. He needed the help. "You've always helped when things were hard." "I help when you ask me," I said. "You didn't ask. We didn't think." "I know exactly what you thought," I said. "That is every word I spoke in that dining room." I did not raise my voice. I did not recite the charges aloud. I did not tell them what I was about to do. I picked up my phone, put it in my jacket pocket, and said that I needed to take care of something and would be in touch. I walked out through the front door, down the 3 porch steps, across the driveway to my car. I sat in the car with the engine off for 4 minutes before I started it. Something inside me had gone very still, not the stillness that comes before crying, which I know the weight of, but a different kind. The stillness that settles after a decision that has not yet been consciously named, but is already completely formed somewhere below the thinking. I had been the reliable daughter my entire adult life. The low-maintenance one. The daughter who helped without being asked and did not keep a ledger and did not make scenes. I had worn that identity the way you wear a coat you have owned so long you have forgotten it is not your skin. And what my father said in that dining room, "You never checked that account," was not only a confession. It was a portrait of me, accurate in every particular. They had looked at the person I had spent 31 years building, and they had seen, correctly, a person whose reliability made her safe to use without asking. I had made myself available in ways I had not understood I was making myself available. That was done now. I drove home. At 8:07 p.m. I opened the banking app. At 8:11 p.m. I called the fraud line and was connected to a dispute specialist named Kevin Adler. I spoke with him for 36 minutes. I explained the situation with the same precision I bring to billing disputes at work. Unauthorized charges over 31 months. Perpetrators known to me. The familial relationship irrelevant to the question of authorization. Kevin Adler was professional and methodical. He walked me through each charge category, confirmed every transaction I had not authorized, which was every transaction after June of the prior year, and initiated formal dispute proceedings on the full $18,340. We ended the call at 8:47 p.m. My parents were, in all likelihood, still at the dining room table. I want to walk you through the following 6 weeks with some precision, because the precision matters. Within 48 hours of the filing, my bank issued provisional credits to my account for the full disputed amount while the formal investigation ran. The card was suspended from further use on the same day. At 9:22 a.m. on February 16th, a Saturday, my phone rang. My mother. I did not answer. She called again at 11:43 a.m. and again at 2:17 p.m. 3 calls in a single day, more than she had made to me in any recent day, for reasons unrelated to Sunday dinner logistics. My father began calling on February 17th, at 8:44 a.m., then 11:07 a.m., then 2:33 p.m. On the third call, he left a voicemail. I listened to it once. He said what had happened was being blown out of proportion and that he and my mother wanted to sit down and explain the context. He used the word context 3 times in a 90-second message. He mentioned that family situations were complicated. He did not say he had done something wrong. He did not say sorry. He said context and complicated and family, and he said them in that order, and I did not call back. On February 20th, I retained an attorney. Her name is Patricia Wole, Consumer Rights and Civil Law, Greensboro, 19 years of practice. I found her through a referral from a colleague at Hartfield Freight who had used her office the prior year. I called on the morning of the 20th and had an intake call with her paralegal, Deja Oates, who took down the facts of the situation with efficient and unsurprised calm. My consultation was scheduled for February 22nd at 3:15 p.m. I prepared for that meeting the way I prepare for anything important, methodically, more thoroughly than strictly required. I printed the full transaction history. I typed a 2-page written account of the February 14th conversation, including specific language, the timestamp of my arrival, and the duration of the silence before my father spoke. I organized the charges by category with a subtotal for each. I arrived at Patricia Wole's office on Elm Street at 3:08 p.m. Patricia Wole has the particular manner of someone who has heard things in her career that once surprised her and has since arrived at a place where very little does. She reviewed everything I had brought. She asked questions about the timeline, about the access method, about the specific words used on February 14th. Then she set her pen down and told me that what I was describing constituted, under North Carolina statute, unauthorized use of a financial transaction card, and that the familial relationship between myself and the individuals involved did not change the legal characterization of the conduct. She said the cases that resolved most cleanly were the ones where the affected party arrived with documentation. She outlined my options: allow the bank's dispute resolution to stand without further action, pursue a civil remedy, or file a report with law enforcement, understanding that criminal proceedings involving family members are rarely predictable in outcome. She was not recommending any specific path. She was describing what the landscape looked like. I told her I needed a few days to think. She said that was wise. I left her office at 4:52 p.m. and walked to the coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment, a place I go when I need to think in the presence of other people because the ordinary sounds of a busy room ground me in a way that silence in my apartment does not. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a window table for nearly 2 hours. It was cold outside, still gray, the light fading by 5 o'clock the way it does in February. I watched a woman push a stroller past the window. I watched a teenager lock a bicycle to a pole and disappear into the shop next door. I watched a couple argue briefly at the corner and then walk away together in the same direction without resolving it, which struck me as a very particular kind of intimacy that I recognized. I thought about the word context. I thought carefully about whether there was a version of what had happened that I was reading incorrectly, a version in which 31 months of silence had an explanation that changed its meaning. I stayed with that possibility for the full 2 hours. I did not dismiss it quickly. I have always distrusted quick conclusions, especially my own. I could not find a version that held together. 31 months is not a single moment of weakness or a lapse in judgment that expanded before anyone noticed. It is a sustained choice, renewed each time a grocery charge went through without remark, each time the gas station transaction cleared, each time the Savannah hotel booking processed, and they packed their bags and drove south on a trip funded by a card whose owner had no idea she was paying for the journey. 31 months is a decision built on a precise and accurate understanding of who I was. The daughter who would not notice. The reliable one. The one who helped without being asked and did not keep a ledger and would not, apparently, check the right account. On February 28th, my bank completed its investigation and issued a determination in my favor. All $18,340 in disputed charges was reversed. The account was closed and a replacement card was issued to a new number. My credit score, which I checked on March 1st for the first time since the dispute had begun, had dropped 18 points over the previous 2 years due to elevated utilization I had not been generating, utilization that had been quietly eroding a number I had spent years building, without my knowledge, without my consent. Patricia Wole confirmed on March 3rd that the bank's resolution was thorough and that no further legal action on my part appeared to be necessary at this time.
She said to call her if that changed.
My brother Marcus also called me on March 3rd. He called once, which I noticed specifically. He said, after a silence long enough that I checked whether the call had dropped, that he had not known the registration fee in March of 2023 had come from my card rather than from our parents. He said he was sorry if he had been part of something that hurt me. His voice had a quality I had not heard in it before, not quite guilt, but the thing that sits next to guilt, the sound of a person who has just learned something about the people he trusted and is not sure yet what to do with the information. I told him I believed him. I told him I was glad he called. We spoke for 11 minutes and said more honest things to each other than we had in the previous year. My parents called 63 times between February 15th and March 15th. I documented every call with the date and time. I answered twice. The first time was March 4th at 6:17 p.m. My mother. She said they had been in a very difficult financial stretch for over a year. My father's warehouse hours had been cut the prior spring, and there had been expenses they had not anticipated, and that they had told themselves the arrangement was temporary, that they intended to pay me back when things stabilized, that I would not be harmed because the balance was paid automatically every month and nothing was really accumulating on my end. I let her finish. Then I asked her one question. Had she ever considered picking up the phone and telling me they needed help? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that asking me directly had felt. She paused here for several seconds, like admitting something she was not ready to admit. I said, I understood that now. I ended the call at 3 minutes and 52 seconds. The second time was March 9th at 8:34 p.m. My father. He had been drinking, which I recognized immediately from the slight looseness in his cadence that I have known since childhood. He said he wanted to understand why I was trying to destroy the family. He said the word family the way he always said it when he meant it as a weight and not a warmth, as an obligation, as a claim, as a statement that because you are mine, what you have is available to me in ways that do not require asking. I said I was not trying to destroy anything. I had simply stopped funding something I had never agreed to fund. He said that was not how family worked. I said I was coming to understand that, and I ended the call. My credit score, as of April 11th, had recovered to 744. 6 points higher than it had been the month before my parents made their first unauthorized charge in March of 2022. I have not returned to their house since February 14th. I still drive past it occasionally, on the route between my apartment and the grocery store on Lawndale Drive. The lights are usually on in the front room in the evenings. The HVAC unit in the backyard, the one I apparently paid $339.67 to service last November, runs steadily and quietly in the cold. I do not stop. I do not feel the pull to stop that I might have expected myself to feel. What I feel instead is something quieter and more durable, the specific equilibrium of a person who has finally stopped waiting for something that was not going to come and has discovered, somewhat to her own surprise, that she is entirely fine. Reliability without self-protection is not a virtue. It is an invitation. The people who love you should not require you to stop paying attention to your own finances in order to feel safe with them. I understand that now with a clarity I did not have on the morning of February 14th, and the clarity does not feel like a loss. It feels like ground that is actually solid. If you have ever received a fraud alert on an account you rarely check, do not dismiss it as a processing error before you look. Under the Fair Credit Billing Act, consumers in the United States have the right to dispute unauthorized charges within 60 days of the statement date, but many major banks extend this window considerably for cases of systematic or ongoing unauthorized use, particularly when the cardholder can demonstrate a clear pattern and provide documentation of the charges. The dispute process is available to you even when the person who made the charges is someone you know well. The bank does not require the relationship to be adversarial. It only requires the charges to have been unauthorized. Mine were. If you were in Dana's position, if you had sat across from your father in a dining room that smelled like pot roast while he told you, without apology, that he had simply assumed you would not check, would you have let the bank's dispute resolution stand and moved forward, or would you have taken the additional step of consulting an attorney about the full range of your legal options?